I'm Julianne Zimmerman, Managing Director with Reinventure Capital, based in Boston, Massachusetts. We have a fund based here in the States, investing here in the States, in companies led by people of color and/or women. We invest across sectors in companies that can grow profitably to become economic engines. Our impact objective is to begin to break the persistent asymmetry in access to capital for overlooked founders, to grow companies that create value for their stakeholders and for their investors. Reinventure seeks out companies that are, again, led by people of color and/or women, that are at or about break even. So they have demonstrated that they have a value proposition they can deliver to their customers repeatably, and that those companies are positioned to grow profitably. We're interested particularly in companies here in the US, across sectors, that can become number one or number two in their market segment by a variety of paths. They may be taking advantage of shifting demographic, regulatory, or use conditions in their segment. They might grow organically by either pioneering a new market niche or by capturing market share from an established incumbent. They might grow by acquisition. But in any case, they are positioned to grow profitably and to make use of other forms of capital besides equity. As compared to the typical venture-backed company that is dependent on significant and increasing equity investments, these companies may make use of equity as well as debt. We are particularly interested in companies that have a variety of exit scenarios. So they might, for example, have an acquisition event in which the company merges or is acquired by a larger entity. They may remain private and have a buyout, a structured buyout, a management buyout, in which they are able to retain ownership of the company. They may, in fact, have an IPO if the market conditions are ripe for them. But across the companies we look for companies that have more than one credible exit scenario, so that we have confidence that both the founders and our investors in the fund have the opportunity to reap the benefit of that investment. Our primary impact is putting capital to work behind those founders who are overlooked by mainstream investment capital. The companies we're interested in also have their own impact objectives, and it's important to us to work with the founders of those companies to codify their impact objectives in our investment agreements, in the governance of the company, so that those impact objectives become deeply ingrained in the decision-making of the company when we invest and in the future. Those impacts could be social, they could be environmental, they could be health, they could be in any number of fields. And it's important to us that we don't prescribe in advance what those impacts or those objectives might be. Our aim, in fact, is to have a portfolio of quite diverse companies with very different impact objectives. The way that we will work with the teams is, first of all, to help them clarify and codify those objectives, to set priorities for decision-making, for strategic hiring, decisions about market approach, decisions about committing to different product or service launches or partnerships, in order to make sure that those impact objectives remain front and center in their decision-making, in the growth of the company. We will also work with the founders to assist them with more general concerns, decisions, and priorities as they grow the company. So assisting them as board members, as advisors, to make decisions based on the objectives that are congruent with their strategic goals. The Reinventure investment approach is about finding companies that are at or about break even and channeling a mix of equity and debt to those companies to assist them to grow profitably. Again, we're focusing on companies led by women and people of color. And our first line of impact is to assist them to grow those companies to be wealth and job creators. Our second line of impact is to identify the specific impact objectives the founders have for their companies and work with them to codify those impact objectives in the governance of the company. We will work with the founders to help them not only on the impact objectives, but with the day-to-day business strategic decisions that enable them to grow enterprises of scale. As board members, as advisors, our role is to provide advice and support to enable those founders to be successful. Ultimately, our goal is to have a portfolio of as many as possible successful companies.